All right, welcome back to the Founder-Led Marketing Show. In today's episode, we talk about how to start a CEO thought leadership program for LinkedIn in 2024, how to create a weekly live show, produce that into a podcast and a long-form video post, and use that as the pillar to create a daily thought leadership LinkedIn post for your founder and CEO, and then repurpose that in ads, the whole framework, what tools we use, etc., etc., etc. I hope there's value in there. If you have any questions after this, anything that you feel like we didn't cover, any specifics that you would like to have details on, just message me on LinkedIn. And now enjoy the episode. So, topic of today is how to start a CEO thought leadership program in 2024 for LinkedIn, and a framework for that on how to do it easily, how to create a lean content production system that allows your CEO or founder to produce content in a streamlined way so you can actually get it done. Who needs this? I think thought leadership obviously applies to most companies. I think especially when you're in the high ticket B2B space, you're selling into mid-market or enterprise. So meaning you're selling into senior decision makers, into sophisticated buyers, where you sell, big deals, high ASPs. So you need to build a lot of trust and credibility. And how do you build trust and credibility? Through thought leadership, right? That's what thought leadership is. If you're a thought leader, that means that you're a respected, accepted expert in your field, and people look to you for your opinions and thoughts and expertise. So step number one is you need an actual thought leader. And that's why we usually do this with the founder and CEO, because they understand the product, the company, their customers, their market, their industry better than anyone else, more deeply than anyone else. And they're usually the person who's most likely to be an actual thought leader. It's not guaranteed. Not all founders and CEOs are thought leaders. Now, some of this strategy is going to apply to people who might be fresh CEOs. It's the first company. They've only run it for a year or 2 years. They've not been in the industry for 20 years. They've not, done a lot of things yet. But that's ingredient number one. Now, once you have that, you need a way to produce content in an easy, fast, streamlined, programmatic way that leverages your founders and CEOs' expertise and insights, and produces content that you can then leverage on the platform that actually matter today. And those platforms are podcasts, they're LinkedIn, and there might be some other platforms, but those are the two that we're going to focus on. So the framework that we're going to outline here today is based on one large pillar piece of content, and that is a live show. And you want to do this weekly. So you can think of this as a webinar. I don't like calling it a webinar. I like calling it a web show, because it helps you to not fall back into the classic webinar best practices and just do what everyone else is doing and just repeat that. What does that look like? So we want to do a weekly show, and it's over our CEO or founder in that webinar, because again, they're the thought leader and we need their expertise and insights to actually build a thought leadership program. And there's two ways to do it. There's a solo, and then there's with a guest, right? Solo, by the way, what you're seeing right now here is kind of us practicing what we're preaching, right? This is kind of like a live show that we produce weekly. We call it the Founder-Led Marketing Show. It's generally me alone or with someone on our team or with a guest talking for an hour, right? I think a good kind of time is 1 hour you want to do them. And you want to make them programmatic so that they happen always on the same day at the same time. So just pick a day, pick a time, and make it recurring, right? That's very important to make it easy on your team to plan for these. So for us, it's every Wednesday at 6 p.m. CET or 12 p.m. EST, we do this. So solo, right? It's just your founder and CEO talking alone. This is an example of that. I have Toby on here, but it's mostly me talking. And you want to address core/big priorities/problems of your ICPs. Right? What are those core big priorities and problems that your ICPs are dealing with? Ask them what is it they're dealing with, and those are the topics of your live show, right? If you have a guest, There's a bunch of different types of guests that you can have. I think about them in 3 different terms. One of them is customers. So this is people that you're already working with, and you want to highlight them. You want to give them a stage, give them an opportunity to talk about you and your work and what you've done with them and why they work with you and how it's helping them and all those things, right? Because they're a customer of yours. They're evangelizing for you. Another one is an ICP. So you can invite a prospect at a target account that you're trying to sell into onto your show and interview them. And there's a couple benefits to that. One, it's free market research for you because you get to understand your ICPs. You can ask them whatever question you want, right? What are the things that you're dealing with? What are you seeing in the market? What solutions have you tried before? How are you approaching this problem and how do you think about that, right? Like, it's free market research for you. And it's much easier to ask a cold prospect to come onto your podcast or to come onto your live show because you want to interview them than asking them for a sales call or demo. But once you did that and you've now highlighted them and you put them on a pedestal and you highlighted their expertise, they're more likely, much more likely, to actually have a sales conversation with you after that. And then the third one is thought leaders. So this is other people in your space who your ICPs respect and look up to and see as a thought leader, right? For us, we're in the B2B SaaS space. So who are the leaders in the B2B SaaS space that our customers look up to and want to learn from? Maybe it's Jason Lemkin, maybe it's Chris Walker, maybe it's Jason Fried, maybe it's generally founders and CEOs of public B2B SaaS companies who've been there, done that, who've scaled the company to hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. If we can get those people onto the podcast or the live show, even though they're not a customer and they're probably not an ICP because we don't sell into that exact persona, but because our persona is looking up to them, you're doing a bunch of things, right? One, it's easier to get reach for your show, right? Because these thought leaders, they already have a big audience. They already have distribution. So by you inviting them on your show, if they share it, if they talk about it, you get that reach, that top of funnel reach. And two, you get a halo effect, right? If you get that big person in your industry on your show and you interview them, even if you've never worked with them and never will be working with them, it gives you that halo effect. And we've noticed that. I've interviewed Jason Fried, who's the co-founder and CEO of 37 Signals, the makers of Basecamp and Hey. Not a customer, not a prospect for us. They already know how to produce content, but a lot of our ICPs respect and look up to Jason Fried. And by having him on our show, one, we got the distribution because he actually recently reshared a clip that we produced for him for the podcast. And that got like 50,000 impressions on Twitter where he shared it. And it got lots of people going to our YouTube to check out the episode, subscribe to our channel, et cetera, et cetera. And I started having conversations with people who reached out to me because they saw that I interviewed Jason Fried and they love Jason Fried. And so that, colored off on me. And so that's great, right? So you do this. And so, by the way, depending on how much of an actual thought leader your founder and CEO is, that will determine kind of your proportions between these two formats, right? Because if your founder and CEO is already a big thought leader in their space, they are the Jason Fried, they are the Jason Lemkin, they are the Chris Walker, then you can get away with basically just doing solo podcasts, right? Because there's so much expertise and insights that you can draw from, and people just really respect you and they want to listen to you and what you have to say, right? If you look at Chris Walker and the Demand Gen Live that they did, I think 95% of them was literally just Chris Walker talking, right? If you don't have that type of founder and CEO, and I consider myself in that category, I think we know stuff, and I think I'm pretty good at and decent at LinkedIn and marketing, but I'm far from being a big thought leader and expert in demand gen or SaaS or B2B marketing or any of these things. There's people who are way more knowledgeable, way more experience, who have way bigger followings than I do. And so we leverage a lot of guest posts, guest interviews where we bring on people who have that level of expertise that we can then leverage, right? So That's one thing to think about, whether it's maybe 50-50 or 25-75 or whichever proportions you might want to do, right? And so you do this, and then from there, we already have 2 core pillars. So, oh, I forgot one core piece. Because this is live, we have here an audience that joins live. All right, that's why you want to do it live, because in the beginning you will get no people to join. There's maybe 1 or 2 people to join. But if you keep doing this and you keep bringing on great guests and you do great interviews, over time you will start an audience who will want to join live. And the benefit of joining them live, the incentive of making people want to join live, because obviously you're going to take that recording and upload it to podcasts and all these other things, is that they can ask questions to you and the guest. That's the incentive for people to show up live, right? If I have Jason Fried there, if I have Philipp Strömann, who scaled the SaaS business to 10 million plus, people can now join and ask them the question that they've maybe always wanted to ask them. So you're building a community who's really engaged. And by the way, one other benefit of that is that you get to hear, because obviously the show that you produce is produced for your ICPs, right? The topics that you create, again, are based on the core big priorities and problems of your ICPs. So the audience that you will hopefully start attracting is your ICPs. And so if they start joining the event live and they will ask questions around the topic that you do in the live show around, then you get to hear from them directly what they want to know and what they want to hear. And that's the best content you can create, rather than you thinking up in your head and brainstorming about what your ICPs might want to learn about in here. It's them telling you directly what they want to learn and hear from you about, right? So that's another thing. Okay, so we do this once a week, always same day, same time. And now we already get 2 things. We get a podcast and we get a long form YouTube video, right? We're going to post-produce this interview. We're going to record it, by the way, using something like Zoom or Riverside FM. Those are the kinds of tools you can use to reduce and record and produce the live show. You can then stream it to LinkedIn Live, like we do right now, if you want to do that. And then you have the recording and you produce it into a podcast, again, 1 hour long, right, roughly. You upload that on Spotify plus Apple Podcasts. You can use a tool like Transistor.fm, or Anchor. Actually, it's renamed now to Spotify for podcasters, and you're going to upload the video on YouTube. So now you have a weekly 1 hour YouTube video here. So that's great. You have that going out, and you're going to be building an audience from there over time. And then the next step is you take, again, the same recording, the 1 hour recording, and you turn it into 5 different LinkedIn posts. And because you do this every week, if you then turn that 1 hour recording into 5 bite-sized LinkedIn posts, so this can be text or image or video, right? Bite-sized, 2 to 3 minutes, 5 minutes long, where you make one specific point, you share one specific insight or expertise. From a weekly interview, you get 5x LinkedIn posts for a post Monday through Friday. And you're going to post these on your founder, CEO, personal profile, right? So now you have the live show with a guest that you can build a relationship with. You have a live audience who can ask you questions. You have your weekly podcast going out to Spotify and Apple. You have your weekly long form YouTube video going out. And you now take that recording as the baseline to produce your LinkedIn content. And the good part about this is that even if no one shows up to your live event as an audience, like right now we have a handful of people joining here, because we're still starting out and we're still figuring out how to promote this and everything. It doesn't matter so much because we still get the recording, we still get the podcast, we still get the YouTube video, and we still get all of that LinkedIn content afterwards that we can repurpose on my LinkedIn profile and in the form of videos, text, and images. You can then also repurpose it to the company page on LinkedIn, but the main priority is the personal profile. And then the last step, to really get everything out of it, is to then take these, you post them organically, you use a tool called Shield to analyze the performance of these, and you track which ones are performing, which ones are resonating, which ones are really doing well, and then only those you put into LinkedIn ads targeted towards target accounts and ICPs. And so now you have a complete framework to use the two most important channels in B2B marketing right now, a podcast and LinkedIn, to be present in the places where your buyers spend time. And you have a machine where through a weekly episode, through a weekly live event, you're churning out all this content. What we started doing, or what we're in the process of doing, we've now done how many episodes of our weekly show? 24. No, 25. We did 25 episodes. These are all in the books. This one got rescheduled, so that's why we're doing a solo one. We're doing it every week. We've been doing it every week since end of July. And so, we have this simple sheet where we just have the date, the guest, the topic, and then here we can input the published links, which we haven't really been doing. And then what you want to do is ideally build a guest pipeline, right? If you're not going to, you want to have these things in advance. And there's definitely one thing that we're learning is that until now, it's been a lot kind of on the go, and kind of every week we need to decide, okay, what are we going to be talking about this week? And who are we going to have as a guest? And slowly we got better at like scheduling things in advance. And so you want to build a pipeline of topics and guests. And again, if you want to break it down by customers, ICPs, and thought leaders, you just build a list for each of them. You build a list of thought leaders in your space, you build a list of customers you want to interview, and you build a list of your dream customers, your prospects at target accounts that are the economic buyer of whatever you're selling. And then you build a simple outreach flow where you invite them on your podcast. You build a Calendly invite link that basically has just one slot. I think ours is calendly.com/podcast. Whoop. You want to operationalize this stuff, right? And so there's a Calendly that we have that basically just has open slots for every Wednesday at 6 p.m. when we do our event. And so I reach out to the people on our list. I say, hey, do you want to come on our show? If they say yes, I say, well, here's the link. Pick a Wednesday that works for you, right? And that makes it already much easier. You build a pipeline of people. Then, there's a couple different ways you can record and stream this. We're still figuring out which one's the best tool, because it seems like right now there's no perfect tool. So it each have their own trade-offs. So we've been using Riverside.fm a lot for recording the interview and using it to stream. The upside of this, and you can see here past episodes with guests and the recordings all in here. The upside of that is that you can get a full resolution video and audio of both guests separately, so that we can have that, full HD video if we want to produce bite-sized video content, either for us or for the guest. And we have that. The downside of that is that you can't really have an audience join you live. We use this to stream to LinkedIn. LinkedIn Live is a super bad product. I don't know what they're doing with LinkedIn Live. So that's a little buggy, and it's hard to have an audience. So that's why we're playing around with Zoom again, because then we could have actual people on here in Zoom asking us and the guest questions. So those are just two options. And then you produce the podcast episode. We use, just Adobe Premiere Pro to edit the podcast. You can use maybe something like Descript for the editing of the podcast. That seems to be a pretty good tool that's relatively easy to use. You don't need to have a professional video editor. You can do most of it by yourself. You can have an episode, and then you upload the video on your podcast, on your YouTube channel. And then what we currently use to upload the podcast is Spotify for podcasters. It used to be called Anchor.fm. They got bought by Spotify, so it's called Spotify by Podcast. So it's pretty easy. You basically just upload the same video file that you upload to your YouTube channel, and it automatically distributes it for you on any podcast platform that you want. The two most important ones to have are Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But you can also add, I think there's like Amazon and all kinds of other players that you can add. And you can see here, we've got 36 episodes live. And most of them don't get a lot of plays. Again, we're still in the process of building this up. You can see our top episode here is the one with Jason Fried, which got 42 plays. Not a lot of people, right? But I'm totally okay with that because number one, we're doing this for the long term, and it takes a long time to build a podcast audience. And two, I know that we're getting our kind of monies and time worth because we turn the podcast into LinkedIn content for me, which definitely gets reach. So even if only a handful of people listen to the podcast as of today, it's still worth it to us. And there we go. I guess YouTube is now. So you can also see here some of the interviews here. And we don't only upload the interviews here. You can see here, here's an example with Udi Ledergor or Philipp Strömann. The one with Jason Fried, again, did the best thought leader in our space. He shared it, 330 views, got us a bunch of subscribers. And then we turn all of that into bite-sized LinkedIn content, which you can see on my LinkedIn. A lot of the kind of content that we share here is from the podcast. This is, a clip from the podcast where I interviewed Justin Rowe, where we turned it into kind of a collaboration post where it's partly me in the video asking Justin a question. He answers the question. It's a relevant piece of content for our audience. So that's the main for the organic. We then also publish it on our LinkedIn company page, right? The Project 33 company page, but it's really not a priority for us because just with how the LinkedIn algorithm does reach, it's just so much more important that you share. You can see here 1 like, 2 likes, 1 like. It's not really a priority for us, but you can do that. And then the last one is repurposing it for ads, right? And so you can see here our ad account, and we are running right now a bunch of image ads and video ads. And here you can see the main ad that we're currently running is a video that was originally an organic post. This was actually not produced from a live event. This was produced in a recording session that we also do weekly, which is a separate thing, but I wanted to focus on the live event. So this started out, this ad, which got us actually 2 customers on a $60,000 contract. So, that's $120,000 in initial contract value from one ad. And this video, which is 3 minutes long, where I talk about what I would do as a head of marketing, started out as an organic post that I posted to my regular LinkedIn. You can see it here. And it performed really well. Here it is. This is the organic post 6 months ago. And so we used it in our ads, and turns out it also performs really well in the ads. And this is actually, an ad with 234 engagements on it and 85 comments is a pretty rare thing. And part of the reason is, I think, because this doesn't feel and look like an ad. It feels like me just sharing my opinion and expertise like I do in my organic posts. So that's how you can then take the best performing stuff that you can see performs on LinkedIn. And again, we use a tool called Shield for that, shieldapp.ai, that you can use to track your LinkedIn stats, and you can filter and you can see, which post did the best. And then you can use that information to channeled into targeted accounts, targeted LinkedIn ads, to make sure that you educate your target accounts and your ICPs at scale and make them aware of who you are, what you do, build trust and credibility, generate demand. Toby, any particular, we've been doing this now for a couple of months. Any particular lessons or takeaways from you of things that we've learned over those 3 months? Because we did a lot of trial and error. So like there were
That's true.
definitely lots of mistakes that we made and tools that we maybe used that we went back on. Or I think one thing we're still trying to figure out how to do better is how to promote the events, both pre and post event. But for you, any main takeaways or
I mean, I
lessons?
guess the biggest takeaway is just getting started. I felt like because that was, I think, the biggest hurdle to actually start,
Mm,
which didn't really happen for us in the beginning. We were kind of doing it like bi-weekly, and then you skip a week, and in the end, you end up not doing it at all.
right,
So I felt like that's the biggest one. And I don't know, like it depends on the guests, because I feel like right now for us, and I mean, what we basically do is like we leverage that as we show the guests and the potential customers how our workflow works and what you get out of from just being on the live stream basically. So I mean, that is big in case you're an agency or anything, and you're doing stuff like that. You can basically promote your service doing that while adding value. I think
right.
that was like really big, and that's what we see for ourselves works pretty well. Um, yeah, and I mean, I don't know, like we still have some
I
time. I
think
think.
I think just one thing I wanted to, because you said it, and I didn't really focus it on the flow. So we do the live event and then we produce LinkedIn content for us. But what we also do is we produce posts for the guests that we then send to them afterwards and say, hey, by the way, we produced this 3-minute video from the podcast that we did where you share this one really interesting point. Feel free to use it for, and a lot of them end up posting it on their own LinkedIn. Why? Because they want to look good to their audience. And so they're making a really good, interesting point in that video that we sent them. And so they want to share it. And so a lot of them ended up just tagging us and saying, by the way, this is from an interview we did with Finn or with Project 33, and they tagged us. And number one, that's how people found us. And we currently have one deal in pipeline with a CRO of a $3 million company. And the way that it happened is that we had a guest on who I interviewed. This person is not a customer of ours and is actually not an ICP of ours, but he is a leader in the space and he's well known. And so he knew that person. And so when that person shared the clip that we sent to him from the podcast and tagged us, that was enough of a halo effect where that person reached out to me and said, hey, I'm buddies with that person. We used to work together at HubSpot 6 years ago, and I really respect him. Found you guys through him. Let's have a chat. Right. And so you not only generate awareness, but you actually generate trust because you get that halo effect. So yeah, I mean, this new live thing is basically this new format that we're experimenting with, and we're now rolling it out to the first customer. For most customers, what we still do is that instead of doing this once a week, 1 hour session, instead of making it a live show, we're making it an offline interview where we, Toby in this case, or Jay, our directors of demand gen, interview our customers, right? And we prepare questions around their company, their product, and their expertise. And so the benefit of that is that the pressure is less because it's not live. You're not streaming it to an audience. You don't have people sitting in there. So if there's a mistake, if the founder says something that doesn't quite make sense, we can always like cut it out or go back and re-record. Um, so it's a lot more chill. You obviously have more flexibility in terms of like each individual piece of content. Because when you do a 1 hour live show, it needs to be cohesive, right? So you need to go from this to this to this, and it all needs to be connected to be one overarching big topic for the 1 hour. You can't suddenly go into like, here's this new feature that we built and why, right? And oh, by the way, we're announcing a new office and blah blah blah, right? It's just you can't do it. So the offline sessions allow you to produce those sorts of things, and I think they're still valuable in addition to the live event, right? We've recently been recording a lot more ads where we spend time, you know, trying to get out a very like um high pace 2 or 3 minute video where we talk about a pain point that we solve and how we solve it. You can't do that in the flow of a 1 hour webinar. So that's a benefit. The downside is that you don't get the added benefit of having this live event that you can invite prospects to, that you have an audience in, that you can build a racial relationship with a prospect or a thought leader in your space because it's just you and someone on the team doing the interview. Um, and you don't really get a podcast out of it because, again, the offline recording sessions often a lot more kind of jumping between different topics, and there's some back and forth in terms of coaching and, hey, let's try this again, let's focus on this point. So you can't make it a 1 hour podcast, but a live event you can. So both have their pros and cons. And so actually what we're doing for ourselves is that we do both. So every week we do this live event on Wednesday at 6 p.m. And then also every Friday, I have a recording session with Toby where we prepare separate topics that we want to tackle that might be for an ad or for something else that we want to talk about. And the customer that we're rolling it out for, it's actually going to be similar, where we do a combination of a live event and an offline recording session. So yeah.
Yeah, I think when you consider starting such a program, and like I think the live event in the beginning can be very like a very big thing to tackle and figure out how to set it up.
Daunting.
So I think like if you want to start something like that, I guess you can definitely start with the recording sessions internally. Just get one of the executive team and prepare the questions. And I think one good way to start is, Finn, if you want, you can share our onboarding questionnaire maybe, where we basically can just show how we basically um, get to the questions on what input, what's the kind of input that we're using there.
Right. Let me share that. It's an ongoing iteration process, but basically when we get a new customer, we send them a questionnaire, and this is kind of our holy grail or Bible, like the core fundamental document on which we ideate all of the content with customers. Because again, if you're going to be creating thought leadership content, it needs to have depth, it needs to have relevance to your audience, and you can't just come up with like, oh, what did you do last week? And, what's your favorite food? And so basically the sections are: first, we define their ICP. Obvious, we want to know who we're talking to. Some of my favorite questions in here, besides just job title and target accounts and everything: what other outside characteristics or traits signify an ideal prospect to you? People often miss that one, that it's not just firmographics, but other circumstances. Maybe they're hiring someone. Then we define the product, both the problem that they solve and the solution that they provide. So what are the pain points? Who do you help? What's your pitch? What pain points do you alleviate? What metrics do you drive, and by how much? ACV, average sales cycles, main competitors. Again, one of my favorite questions here is: what suspicions, limiting beliefs, and unrealistic expectations do prospects have that prevent them from trusting your company or approach in the first place? And so they're often left unsaid, and we want to unearth those, because then we can tackle each of them in a separate piece of content and kind of front load these suspicions and limiting beliefs that might hinder someone from reaching out to your sales team in the first place. Why do people not buy from you? What are the biggest objections, right? All of this is input. Subject matter expertise. I think one big lesson that we have, that we're still trying to refine, is you need to know really clearly what is the thing in which you want to position yourself as an expert, authority, or thought leader. Because if it's not clear up front and you just talk about what you think and what you know, the story is missing for other people, and they might see you talking about marketing on one day, and then LinkedIn the other day, and then sales on the other day, and then product the next day, and how to hire people and how to fundraise. And it's like, what's really your expertise, right? So you need to know that, and it needs to be both big enough that it's important enough that people actually care, right? But it needs to be small enough that you can actually become a thought leader in it. Because if your thing is, I'm going to become a thought leader in B2B marketing, that's like, good luck with that, right? Or I want to be in B2B sales. It's like, there's already tons of people who have a massive audience. So if you're going to try to compete with them, maybe your thing is not B2B marketing, but B2B demand gen for early stage SaaS companies, right? You're niching down. And so you need to know that. One favorite question again, what commonly held beliefs in your industry do you passionately disagree with? These are often great content ideas. We define some company stuff, founding story, We define some personal stuff, what podcast, books do you listen to, branding, communication style, obviously. Um, yeah. And so this is, again, we have customers who've been with us for over a year, and we can still create new content from this after they've filled it out initially, and it only gets updated if there's a change to the ICP, if there's a change to the product, if there's a pivot towards a different pain point that they solve. But other than this is like the holy grail and the foundation on which we ideate content.
Yeah, and whatever we get out of the recording session, then when we come show up with the questions, is basically what we then plug in the same framework as what comes out of the live events, except that you don't get a podcast out of it. But the framework of how the content engine works basically stays the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I think we covered a lot of ground here. So unless you guys have any questions here, you can drop them in the chat now, and we'll tackle them in the last couple of minutes. But otherwise, I am pretty happy with the ground that we've covered here. Any other thoughts, Toby?
No, I mean in general, like if you have questions, make sure to reach out. You can reach us on LinkedIn. Just comment under the episode or anything, and we get back to you. If you have any topics you want us to cover in the future, any guests you would like to see on the show, let us know for sure, and we try to make it happen.
Cool. All right, guys. If you like this, as I said, we do this every week.